The one consistent thing in my life, other than my hairline, my necessity for sunscreen to step outside without my skin turning lobster red, or comments talking about my striking resemblance to Han Solo,
You're Han Solo.
I used to be.
is the fact that MacBooks are expensive. That's been true since I was a kid, and when my parents wouldn't buy me a MacBook because it was too expensive, so I got stuck taking a $400 Lenovo laptop to school where the hinges cracked after 6 months of using it. And it was also true when I made my first video on the new Retina MacBook Air 7 years ago. 7 years ago. Well, that's an existential crisis I didn't need. Even today, if you go on Apple's website, the cheapest MacBook you can buy right now is $1,000. And that's actually a pretty recent development. 3 years ago, the MacBook Air started at $1,200, the M3 at $1,100, and now finally, the M4 variant takes us back down to the $1,000 starting price. No, we don't talk about the 11-inch MacBook Air that briefly had the $899 price point. No one wanted that one, okay? But yes, $1,000 is the starting point to get a Mac laptop, which always struck me as strange, because if you go online, you can find plenty of Windows laptops below $1,000. I was even able to find one on clearance at Best Buy for $159. I'm not kidding, a full Windows laptop with an Intel chip, 4 gigabytes of memory, a 14-inch full-size screen, and a full-size keyboard, and dear God, what the hell is that abomination? I am sorry to my young viewers out there, I should not have shown that horrific imagery on your screen. Sorry about that slip up. I have no idea how that happened, but it won't happen again. But yes, that is a Windows laptop that you can buy for almost $850 less than Apple's cheapest offering. And even though Apple has always had a reputation as a premium brand with high prices, the strangest part is that price discrepancy does not exist in their other products. The iPhone, Apple's crown jewel, has a dedicated lower cost model with the iPhone 16e. And for years, Apple has been selling a whole range of iPads from the high end to a really great deal on the low end with their base level iPad starting at $350. The Apple Watch also has an extensive premium lineup with the Apple Watch Ultra. This thing's like $800, but then it also has cheaper options on the bottom that targets a more budget-oriented consumer with products like the Apple Watch SE that is really a great value. So it is really odd, perplexing even, why for all these years, Apple has never made a low-cost or a budget-friendly MacBook. Until now. Okay, not officially now because this MacBook hasn't been announced, but it is widely rumored that by Apple's March 4th event, Apple, for the first time in their 50-year-long company history, is about to release a budget MacBook, and I really hope they don't mess it up. Because if they get this right, this budget MacBook, it will forever change the perception that MacBooks are expensive, and it will open up the Mac to more consumers than ever before, digging into a market that previously only Windows laptops or Chromebooks were able to compete in. And by all accounts, it sounds like good news so far. Apple's MacBook is rumored to come in with a starting price at around $600 to $700, a price point much lower than any other Apple laptop in history. The price alone is the most important part of this new MacBook. Apple has to get the pricing right because if it's priced too closely to the MacBook Air, it will just look like a stripped down version of the MacBook Air. So it can't be the situation of a $100 or a $200 price gap. It needs to be substantial, and $699, I think, is the highest Apple should price this MacBook. But the lower they can go, obviously the better. Now, time is money, and I spend so much time tracking all of my finances with multiple credit cards, bank accounts, investments. It really feels like a full-time job, and worst of all, I feel like I'm wasting my time. Until I started using Monarch Money, which lets me combine all those different accounts from different providers into a simplified dashboard. And I was really surprised with how easy it was to connect all of my different accounts, from my bank account to my Apple credit card to my Robinhood investments. Every service was there, and easy to connect and sync all of these accounts into Monarch Money. And this saves me time because I no longer have to check 10 different finance apps to find out when my next credit card payment is, or how my investments are doing, or how much money is in my bank account. I can just go and check Monarch and get all of these updates streamlined directly to me. And I also like how you can manage your financial goals with Monarch and set realistic goals with easy price targets for paying off bad debt or for planning a vacation. I know I can't wait to go back to Japan. Monarch Money saves me time, and as I said before, time is money, which hopefully means I'll make more money and I'll be able to plan that Japan trip soon enough. And when I do, I'll send you some photos, or you can start planning your own vacation and tracking your own finances by clicking the link in the description below and starting with a free trial of Monarch Money and then 50% off your first year. And thank you to Monarch Money for sponsoring this video. Wow, an outfit change, a haircut? Modern technology sure is crazy. Are you sure I'm not AI? Anyway, let's go back to the MacBook, because while the price is important, it isn't the only thing that matters. Because Apple also needs to give this MacBook a unique personality that separates it from the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro. If this is just a cheaper, reskinned MacBook Air with the same design, it won't have its own identity, and it will just continue to draw comparisons to older discounted Macs that third-party retailers have been selling for a while now. However, while also forming its unique personality, it also can't stray away from the reputation that MacBooks have built up over the years. It still has to be high-end, and it still has to be aspirational. And wouldn't you know it, there's also good news on this front as well. Apple is rumored to still keep the premium fit and feel of other MacBooks by using a metal aluminum body. According to Mark Gurman though, Apple has changed something in the manufacturing process of these aluminum MacBooks to make it more affordable. On top of that, while keeping the build quality intact, Apple may also have other form factor changes. I think the most interesting one to dwell on is that this machine will apparently have a 12.9-inch display, a display size that has never been used in a Mac before. This seems to indicate that it is not using the current shell of the M4 MacBook Air. And it also indicates that it's not using the older shell of the M1 MacBook Air. It might be too hopeful to wish for maybe something smaller and lighter than the existing MacBook Air, but it would be cool to see a device that gets a little closer in design to the discontinued ultra-portable 12-inch MacBook. However, the best rumor we have about this MacBook gaining its own unique personality is actually with the rumored color options. Mark Gurman reported that these new low-cost MacBooks will come in multiple fun color options. And what I mean by that is more saturated, bold colors, not like the colors on the MacBook Air that look more like a slightly bluer shade of gray. In fact, the Apple event invite might give us our clearest indication of what these colors will be, with Apple using light blue, green, and yellow for the Apple logo in the event invite, which matches up with the rumored color options Apple was testing for this new MacBook. I have seen a lot of concepts floating around on how this colorful MacBook will look. You have this one by Zelzoy, which I think is the most likely and traditional way to do these color options. Just add color to the aluminum shell and keep all the other aspects of the design exactly the same. However, this concept by Bob Oba is currently my favorite, with a colorful body with white screen bezels and a white keyboard. I know the white bezels and keyboard aren't going to suit everyone's taste, but I like how it looks with these more saturated color choices, and it also lines up a little better conceptually, even with Apple's own lineup, because this design would look perfect in product shots right next to Apple's iMac. A design like this would really give this MacBook an unmistakable identity sitting in a lecture hall or on the table in a cafe, even if it roughly has the same dimensions as an older MacBook Air. And yes, then there's the X factor of doing something new on the Why'd I do that? That was so dorky. Of doing something new on the cheapest option that has never been done in a MacBook before. And there's two plausible areas where Apple can try something new here. The first is because, spoiler alert, we'll get to this in just a second, this Mac is supposed to be using an iPhone chip. And one area where I really think Apple could get some buzz around this MacBook is by making it the first Mac to ship with cellular service. If it already has iPhone internals, then that really can't be all too hard to do, right? So that could really be something cool here. Second is to make this the first touchscreen Mac. Yes, it is rumored that Apple does plan to eventually incorporate touchscreens into the new M6 MacBook Pros, but based on rumors, it sounds like the components for this MacBook may actually be using the same screen as the 12.9-inch iPad Air, which already has a touchscreen. So if Apple is reusing that component to save costs, why not give this MacBook something aimed at users that probably do a lot of computing on mobile anyway? So just add a touchscreen to this MacBook, make it the first touch-enabled Mac, bring that story full circle of the iPhone chip being used in the Mac, and it also being the first touchscreen Mac. I think that would just be a really great selling point. It would make a ton of sense, and it would give this MacBook a unique feature that none of the other MacBooks have. And let's talk about the iPhone chip, because the compromise for buying this cheaper MacBook can't be too severe. And based on rumors, that main compromise is going to be using an iPhone chip instead of the M series chips that are currently designed for the MacBooks. More specifically, according to rumors, Apple is going to use an A18 Pro chip to power this low-cost MacBook. And that is fine. Actually, maybe more than fine, because on paper, the A18 Pro already surpasses the CPU performance of the original M1 chip. And when we look at the performance of laptops in this price range, or what the typical user in this price range does with their laptops, I think the A18 Pro would be more than good enough for basic tasks. And honestly, probably capable enough to handle some lighter professional workloads as well. I think the biggest concern here with the A18 Pro isn't power, but memory. As the A18 Pro currently only comes with 8 GB of memory, so that might be one of the more limiting factors on these new MacBooks. In fact, I feel like there's a good chance there won't be any configuration options on this MacBook. You'll be stuck with the same chip, the same memory, and the only thing you'll likely be able to change is the storage options. And that is where I think the first big compromise might come in: storage. It wouldn't surprise me to see this machine starting at only 128 GB of storage, which was the norm on MacBooks just a few years ago, but I am hoping that is not the case. I am hoping we see at least 256 GB of base storage on this device, even at the lower price point, because 128 GB is pretty low for 2026. The second compromise I think of that would be a real deal breaker for some users is ports. I think it's highly likely that a device using an iPhone style chip would only be afforded one USB-C port. And I don't think it would be a Thunderbolt port, considering Apple doesn't use Thunderbolt on the iPhone. So those would be the two compromises, but I still think even with 128 GB of storage and one port, that is fair on a budget device. And for the vast majority of people out there who might not store a lot on their laptop, or basically only use the port on their device to either connect it to one external display or just to charge the device, these compromises won't overshadow what could be an excellent value. And that really is the whole key here. Above every feature, spec, color choice, the ultimate thing that Apple needs to get right to not mess this up is to deliver on that price point. I think a MacBook for $699 or $600 for education markets will make the Mac a more clear-cut choice, and that will eat into a significant market that Apple has never competed in before. It's why this MacBook truly has the chance to not only just be the low-cost option, but to be something exciting for a whole new generation of Mac users. And I am really excited to see it, and I really hope Apple delivers here. But I guess we won't have to wait too much longer to really find out.